The dog should have forgotten by now. That was what Emily Walker whispered one cold October evening as she stood in the doorway and watched the German Shepherd curled beside the wheelchair once again. Outside, a steady wind moved through the maple trees surrounding the farmhouse, scattering red and gold leaves across the yard like scraps of old memories. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke drifting from a distant chimney, and somewhere beyond the fields, a train horn echoed through the dark. Inside the house, everything was quiet except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Ranger barely lifted his head. The 7-year-old German Shepherd lay pressed against the large wheelchair as though it were the most important thing left in the world. His amber eyes remained fixed on the empty seat. Waiting. Watching. Guarding. 11 months had passed since anyone had sat there. 11 months since Ethan Walker's laughter had filled the room. 11 months since the retired Marine had rolled across those hardwood floors with Ranger faithfully following at his side. Yet every night, without fail, the dog returned to the same spot. Emily stepped closer and gently rested her hand against Ranger's neck. His fur felt warm beneath her fingers. "Come on, boy," she said softly. "Your bed's over there." Ranger's ears twitched. But he didn't move. He never moved. Not when she asked. Not when Noah asked. Not even when visitors tried to lure him away with treats. The wheelchair seemed to hold him there with invisible chains no one else could see. The chair itself sat beneath the front window where moonlight spilled across the worn metal frame. Dust gathered along one wheel. A folded Marine Corps blanket still rested across the back exactly as Ethan had left it. Emily had thought about donating it more than once. Every time she tried, Ranger stopped her. The first time she reached for the handles, he stepped between her and the chair. The second time, he whined so mournfully that she broke down crying before she could touch it. After that, she simply stopped trying. Some grief belonged to humans. Some belonged to dogs. And Ranger carried his faithfully. Upstairs, 12-year-old Noah sat at his bedroom window staring into the darkness beyond the fields. He could see the faint glow of the porch light reflecting across the yard. He could also see Ranger through the living room window. Same place. Same position. Every night. Noah frowned. Something about it no longer felt like sadness. It felt purposeful. As though the dog wasn't mourning at all. As though he was protecting something. Downstairs, Ranger slowly raised his head. His ears stood alert. For several seconds he stared toward the hallway leading to the basement door. The grandfather clock continued its steady rhythm. Tick. 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 Then, just as quietly, the dog lowered his head back beside the wheelchair. But Noah had seen it. And for the first time since his father was gone, a strange feeling settled in his chest. Ranger wasn't waiting for someone who would never return. He was waiting for something else. The next morning arrived beneath a blanket of pale gray clouds. A thin layer of frost coated the pasture beyond the house, turning the tall grass silver beneath the early light. Emily stood in the kitchen pouring coffee while the scent of cinnamon oatmeal drifted through the room. The farmhouse had settled into a routine during the past 11 months. Quiet breakfasts. Quiet evenings. Quiet attempts to keep moving forward. But some mornings felt heavier than others. This was one of them. Noah sat at the table staring out the window. His spoon rested untouched beside his bowl. His eyes kept drifting toward the living room. Ranger was still there. Curled beside the wheelchair exactly where he had been the night before. Emily noticed. She always noticed. "He barely moved all night," she said softly. Noah nodded. "Mom?" She looked up. "Do you think he is protecting it?" Emily managed a tired smile. "Protecting a wheelchair?" Noah shrugged. "Maybe not the chair." The answer lingered in the room long after the conversation ended. Later that afternoon, the autumn sun finally pushed through the clouds. Golden light spilled across the fields and painted the farmhouse windows with a warm glow. Noah returned home from school and found Ranger in his usual spot. The dog lifted his head as Noah entered but did not get up. "You are a strange old soldier," Noah said quietly. Ranger's tail thumped once against the floor. Noah sat cross-legged nearby. For several minutes neither moved. Then something caught his attention. Ranger's gaze shifted toward the hallway. Again. The same direction Noah had seen him watching the night before. Toward the basement door. The dog stood suddenly. Not excited. Not nervous. Purposeful. Noah watched carefully. Ranger crossed the room and stopped beside the closed basement door. His ears remained forward. His nose twitched slightly. Then he turned back toward the wheelchair. After a few seconds he returned and lay beside it once more. Noah frowned. That was not random. That evening, after dinner, curiosity got the better of him. The house had grown quiet. Emily was folding laundry upstairs. The grandfather clock echoed through the hallway. Tick. 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 Noah sat in the darkened living room pretending to read while Ranger rested beside the chair. At exactly 10:17, the dog opened his eyes. Noah almost jumped. Ranger rose without a sound. Then he walked toward the basement door again. This time he nudged it gently with his nose. The old door creaked open several inches. Ranger slipped through the opening and disappeared into the darkness below. Noah's heart began to pound. He set his book aside and moved carefully across the room. The cool air from the basement brushed against his face. He could hear nothing except the distant hum of the furnace. Then came the faint sound of claws moving across concrete. Ranger was downstairs. Noah hesitated only a moment before following. As he stepped onto the first stair, a strange feeling settled over him. Not fear. Not exactly. It felt more like standing at the edge of a memory that someone had forgotten to tell him about. And somewhere below, hidden beneath years of silence, Ranger seemed determined to lead the way. The basement smelled faintly of cedar, old cardboard, and the kind of dust that only gathered after years of being left alone. Noah moved slowly down the wooden stairs, careful not to make too much noise. Each step creaked softly beneath his weight. Ahead of him, Ranger disappeared into the shadows beyond the furnace room. The single overhead bulb cast a warm amber glow across rows of shelves lined with paint cans, holiday decorations, and boxes marked in Ethan's careful handwriting. Winter gear. Camping supplies. Family photos. The sight made Noah pause. His father had labeled everything. He had always said that organization saved time and prevented mistakes. Ranger stopped near the back wall and looked over his shoulder. The dog did not bark. He simply waited. Noah swallowed hard and continued forward. The farther he walked, the more he noticed how deliberate Ranger's movements seemed. This was not a dog wandering aimlessly. It felt more like a guide leading someone toward a destination. The German Shepherd crossed to a corner of the basement where an old workbench sat beneath a small window. Moonlight filtered through the glass, mixing with the yellow glow from the overhead bulb. Dust floated through the air like tiny silver sparks. Ranger lowered his nose and sniffed near the floorboards. Then he pawed once. Noah frowned. "What is it?" The dog pawed again. Not frantically. Intentionally. Noah knelt beside him. At first he saw nothing unusual. Just old wooden planks darkened with age. Then he noticed a narrow scratch running between two boards. It looked different from the others. Cleaner somehow. As though it had been disturbed at some point. Ranger sat down beside the spot and stared at him. Noah reached out and brushed away a thin layer of dust. His pulse quickened. There was definitely something odd about the board. He pressed gently against one edge. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. Ranger let out a low whine. The sound echoed softly through the basement. "Okay, okay," Noah whispered. "I am trying." He glanced around and spotted a flathead screwdriver hanging from the workbench. Ethan had taught him how to use tools years ago. Measure twice. Work carefully. Never force anything. Noah picked up the screwdriver and returned to the floor. He carefully slid the tip into the narrow gap. The board shifted slightly. His breath caught. Ranger immediately stood. Noah worked slowly until one side lifted enough to reveal a small metal ring hidden beneath the wood. For a moment he simply stared. This was not accidental. Someone had put it there. Someone had wanted it hidden. He hooked his fingers through the ring and pulled. The board lifted with a faint scrape. Beneath it sat a small steel box no larger than a shoebox. The metal was worn and slightly tarnished, but it looked intact. Noah felt a chill run through him despite the warmth of the basement. Ranger stepped closer and placed one paw beside the box. His amber eyes never left it. Suddenly a memory surfaced. A conversation from years ago. Ethan laughing on the porch while scratching behind Ranger's ears. "If I ever trust anyone with a mission," he had said, "it will be this guy." At the time everyone had laughed. Standing in the basement now, Noah was no longer sure it had been a joke. He looked at the dog. Ranger looked back. And in the silence between them, Noah began to suspect that his father had left behind far more than memories. For several seconds Noah could not move. The steel box rested on the basement floor between him and Ranger as though it had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. Above them, the old house groaned softly in the autumn wind. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. The familiar sounds of home suddenly felt distant. Ranger sat beside the box with perfect stillness. Not excited. Not anxious. Finished. As if the hardest part of his job was finally over. Noah reached down and brushed away a thin layer of dust from the lid. His fingers trembled slightly. There was no lock. No warning. Just a small piece of masking tape attached to the top. Faded handwriting stretched across it. His breath caught immediately. He recognized the writing. Ethan Walker. The letters were worn with age, but still unmistakable. Noah swallowed hard and carefully lifted the lid. The hinges gave a soft metallic squeak. Inside were several items arranged with remarkable care. On top rested a pair of Marine Corps dog tags attached to a weathered chain. Beneath them sat a folded American flag patch, a small stack of photographs, and a black flash drive sealed. Inside a clear plastic bag. Noah picked up the photographs first. The images showed moments from years earlier. Ethan smiling beside a fishing lake. Emily laughing beneath a 4th of July fireworks display. Ranger as a young dog sitting proudly beside Ethan's wheelchair. Noah stared at each picture as memories returned one by one. Summers that felt endless. Campfires beside the lake. Long conversations on the porch while crickets sang through warm evenings. For the first time in months, he found himself smiling. Then he noticed something tucked beneath the photographs. A sealed envelope. His name was written across the front. Noah. The sight made his chest tighten. He stared at the envelope for several moments before finally opening it. Inside was a single handwritten note. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and old ink. Noah began to read. "If you are holding this, son, then Ranger did exactly what I hoped he would do." Noah stopped breathing for a moment. His eyes darted toward the dog. Ranger remained seated quietly beside him. The note continued. "There are some promises that take time. some take courage. And some need a little help from a loyal friend. If life has brought you here, then you are ready for what comes next. Noah felt emotion rising in his throat. The handwriting seemed alive somehow, as if Ethan were speaking directly from the page. He continued reading. Do not be afraid of missing me. The people we love never really leave. Sometimes they simply leave directions behind. Beneath the note was a second sheet of paper. This one contained only a short message. Watch the video. Everything starts there. Noah carefully reached into the box and picked up the flash drive. His pulse quickened. Upstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 11 times. The sound rolled gently through the house like an echo from another life. Ranger slowly stood and nudged Noah's shoulder with his nose. The gesture felt strangely familiar. Ethan used to do the same thing whenever Noah hesitated before a difficult task. Move forward, son. Noah looked at the flash drive resting in his hand. Then he looked at Ranger. For the first time, he understood why the dog had guarded the wheelchair every night. He had never been waiting for Ethan to come home. He had been waiting for Noah to find the path Ethan had left behind. Noah barely slept that night. The flash drive sat on his desk beside the envelope while moonlight spilled across the room in pale silver bands. Outside, the wind had faded, leaving only the distant sound of rustling leaves and the occasional call of a night bird somewhere beyond the pasture. Ranger lay at the foot of the bed, unusually calm. The dog looked different now. Not because anything about him had changed, but because Noah finally understood there had always been a purpose hidden behind those patient amber eyes. Shortly after sunrise, Noah carried the steel box upstairs. The scent of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen as Emily prepared breakfast. She looked up when she saw the items spread across the dining room table. The photographs. The dog tags. The envelope. The flash drive. Color slowly drained from her face. Where did you find those? She whispered. Noah told her everything. The basement. The hidden compartment. Ranger leading him there. The note. By the time he finished speaking, Emily had covered her mouth with one trembling hand. Ranger sat quietly beside the table, watching them both. He knew, she said softly. All this time, he knew. Noah nodded. Neither of them laughed at the idea. Not anymore. Emily carefully picked up the flash drive. Her fingers lingered on it for a moment before she crossed the room toward Ethan's old laptop. The machine had not been used in months. Dust coated the edges of the screen. When it powered on, the familiar startup sound seemed to echo through the room like a voice from another chapter of their lives. Noah sat beside his mother. Ranger settled at their feet. The flash drive contained only one file. No title. No date. Just a single video. Emily clicked play. For a brief moment the screen remained black. Then Ethan appeared. The recording seemed to have been made in the living room nearly 2 years earlier. Afternoon sunlight poured through the front window behind him. Ranger rested beside the wheelchair, younger but unmistakable. Ethan looked healthy. Strong. His eyes carried the same quiet warmth Noah remembered. For several seconds nobody in the room moved. It felt impossible and wonderful all at once. Then Ethan smiled directly at the camera. Well, he said. If you are watching this, then Ranger completed his mission. Noah felt his chest tighten. Beside him, Emily lowered her eyes. Ethan chuckled softly. I knew he would. He was always the smartest one in the family. Even through the screen, the familiar humor felt comforting. Real. Ethan leaned forward slightly. First things first. If Ranger is sitting nearby right now, tell him he is a good boy. Trust me. He has earned it. Noah looked down. Ranger's ears lifted at the sound of Ethan's voice. The dog moved closer to the laptop and stared at the screen. His tail brushed slowly against the floor. Once. Twice. Emily wiped away a tear. Ethan continued. There is something important I need both of you to do. Something I promised years ago but never got the chance to finish. He paused and glanced briefly toward the window. The smile remained, but something deeper settled into his expression. Hope. Faith. A promise waiting to be fulfilled. Then he looked back into the camera and quietly said the words that would change everything. This journey starts at Silver Pine Lake. And Ranger already knows the way. For a long moment after Ethan's words faded from the speakers, nobody spoke. The room remained still except for the gentle hum of the laptop and the ticking clock in the hallway. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, painting golden rectangles across the floor. Ranger never looked away from the screen. His ears stood forward. His amber eyes reflected the frozen image of Ethan as though he were memorizing it all over again. Then the video continued. Ethan leaned back slightly and smiled. If you made it this far, then I already know what you are thinking. Why Silver Pine Lake? He laughed softly. Fair question. Emily felt her breath catch. She had not heard that laugh in nearly a year. The sound filled the room with both comfort and ache. Ethan reached toward the camera and picked up an old photograph. He held it close enough for them to see. Younger Emily stood beside the lake beneath a canopy of pine trees. The setting sun glowed behind her like liquid gold. This is where I asked your mother to marry me, Ethan said. She said yes before I even finished asking. Emily lowered her head and smiled through tears. Noah glanced at her. He had seen wedding pictures before, but hearing the story from Ethan himself felt different. More alive. More real. Ethan carefully set the photograph aside. A year later, we came back with Ranger. He was still young and convinced every squirrel in Oregon was part of a secret military operation. Even Noah laughed at that. Ranger tilted his head slightly, as if recognizing his own name. Then Ethan's expression softened. That lake became our place. Whenever life got difficult, we always promised we would return. His eyes drifted briefly toward the window. But sometimes life changes plans. The room grew quiet again. Ethan looked directly into the camera. Before I left, I made one last promise. I promised that someday the three of you would go back there together. Noah felt a lump form in his throat. Ethan continued. Not because it is beautiful. Although it is. Not because of memories. Although there are plenty of those. You need to go because there is something waiting there. Noah exchanged a glance with Emily. Ranger slowly stood. His tail began moving gently from side to side. Ethan noticed something off camera and smiled. I should probably explain that part. He reached down and lifted a folded map. Several locations had been circled in red ink. Silver Pine Lake sat at the center. A thin line extended from the shoreline toward a point farther north. Years ago I started planning a family adventure. The kind I always thought we would have time for later. He shook his head gently. Funny how later sneaks up on you. The smile remained, but his voice carried a deeper weight now. I left clues at every stop. Stories. Letters. Things I wanted you both to know. Emily covered her eyes. Noah leaned forward. Ethan pointed directly toward the camera. And there is only one member of the team who knows exactly where to begin. At that moment Ranger walked to the front door. He stopped beside it and looked back toward the family. Once. Twice. Then he sat. Waiting. The room fell silent. Noah stared at the dog. Emily stared at the dog. On the laptop screen, Ethan's frozen smile seemed almost knowing. After 11 months of guarding a promise, Ranger was finally ready to lead them to the next piece of it. The following morning dawned crisp and clear. A bright blue sky stretched over the countryside while sunlight spilled across the fields in long golden ribbons. The farmhouse felt different somehow. Lighter. As though a window had finally been opened after a long winter. By 8 o'clock, Emily had packed a small cooler, several blankets, and the map Ethan had left behind. Noah carried the steel box carefully to the truck. Ranger followed every movement with quiet attention. The moment the map appeared, the German Shepherd stood and walked directly to the passenger door. "I think that answers our question," Noah said. Emily smiled for the first time in days. "Looks like our guide is ready." The drive north took nearly 3 hours. The road wound through rolling hills painted in autumn colors. Red maples flamed along the ridgelines. Golden aspens shimmered in the sunlight. Every few miles Ranger would lift his head and glance toward the windshield as if confirming they remained on the correct path. Emily noticed it too. "You really do know where we are going, do not you?" she whispered. Ranger's tail tapped softly against the seat. Around noon they finally reached the entrance to Silver Pine Lake. The sight stole Noah's breath. The water stretched across nearly 2 miles of forested shoreline, smooth as polished glass beneath the afternoon sun. Tall pines surrounded the lake on every side. Their reflections shimmered across the surface like paintings. The air smelled of evergreen needles and cold fresh water. Somewhere overhead, a bald eagle drifted silently through the sky. Emily parked near a small gravel overlook. For several minutes none of them got out. They simply stared. Memories seemed to live here. In the trees. In the water. In the wind itself. Ranger was the first to move. He jumped from the truck and immediately trotted toward a narrow trail leading along the shoreline. Noah unfolded the map. The red circle Ethan had drawn sat directly over their location. But another mark appeared farther ahead near the northern edge of the lake. About half a mile away. "That must be next," Noah said. Emily nodded. Together they followed Ranger down the trail. Fallen pine needles softened their footsteps. Sunlight filtered through the branches above, creating shifting patterns across the forest floor. The farther they walked, the quieter the world became. Eventually Ranger slowed near a clearing overlooking the water. At the center stood an old wooden bench weathered by years of rain and snow. Noah recognized it instantly from the photograph Ethan had shown in the video. Emily stopped walking. Her eyes filled with tears. "This is where he proposed," she whispered. Ranger approached the bench and sat beside it. Waiting. Noah noticed something carved beneath the seat. He knelt and brushed away dirt and pine needles. His heart skipped. Taped beneath the bench was a small waterproof pouch. Inside rested another envelope. The handwriting on the front looked painfully familiar. Emily. Noah. Ranger. Emily covered her mouth. Noah carefully opened the envelope. A folded letter slipped into his hands. As he unfolded the paper, a cool breeze drifted across the lake and stirred the pine branches overhead. The sound reminded him of distant whispers. Of old promises. Of voices carried by time. Then his eyes found the first line. And suddenly he realized this journey had never been about finding what Ethan left behind. It was about discovering what he believed still lay ahead. Noah's hands trembled slightly as he read the letter. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and old ink, as if it had been waiting patiently beneath the bench for years. Emily stood beside him while Ranger remained seated, his ears forward, his dark eyes fixed on the water. The lake reflected the afternoon sky so perfectly that the horizon seemed to disappear. For a moment it felt as though heaven and earth had quietly met in the same place. Noah began reading aloud. "If you found this, then Ranger brought you exactly where I hoped he would. Emily closed her eyes. Hearing Ethan's words again felt like hearing footsteps in a house that had been empty too long. The letter continued. Ethan wrote about the day he proposed. How nervous he had been. How Emily laughed before he could even finish asking the question. How the lake had witnessed the beginning of everything that mattered. Then the tone shifted. Noah noticed it immediately. Ethan was no longer writing about the past. He was writing about the future. There is one more place I need you to visit, the letter said. Not because it belongs to me. Because it belongs to all of you. Tucked inside the envelope was a second map. Smaller. Newer. A route marked in blue ink stretched several miles beyond the lake toward a hillside overlooking a valley. Emily unfolded it carefully. At the bottom Ethan had written a single sentence. Build a memory there. Do not build a monument. Noah stared at the words. Ranger suddenly stood. The dog glanced toward a narrow path leading deeper into the forest. Then he looked back at them. Waiting. Emily laughed softly through tears. Still giving orders. They followed. The trail climbed gradually uphill. Sunlight filtered through towering pines while a cool breeze carried the scent of earth and evergreen sap. Fallen needles softened every footstep. The farther they walked, the more distant the world became. No traffic. No phones. No noise. Only wind, birdsong, and the steady rhythm of Ranger leading the way. Nearly an hour later the trees opened. Before them stretched a breathtaking overlook. Rolling hills extended for miles beneath the afternoon sun. A silver river wound through the valley below like a ribbon of light. Wildflowers danced among patches of tall grass. At the center of the clearing stood a simple wooden post. Nothing more. Weathered by seasons. Quiet and forgotten. Noah approached first. Attached to the post was a small metal box. Inside rested photographs, handwritten notes, and one final envelope. Emily carefully opened it. A photograph slipped into her hands. She gasped. It showed Ethan standing in this exact spot years earlier. Ranger sat beside him, younger then but unmistakable. On the back Ethan had written, "One day bring Noah here. Let him see how big the world is. Let him know grief is not the end of the road." Emily looked across the valley. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Beside her, Noah stared at the horizon. For the first time since his father was gone, he felt something unexpected growing inside him. Not sadness. Not even longing. Hope. Quiet. Gentle. Real. Ranger walked to the edge of the overlook and settled into the grass. The wind moved through his fur as he gazed across the valley below. And as the sunlight began to soften toward evening, the family slowly understood the truth Ethan had hidden within every clue. This journey was never about finding what he left behind. It was about teaching them how to keep moving forward without him. The sun hung low above the valley as the family remained on the overlook. The golden light softened every shadow and painted the distant hills with colors that seemed almost unreal. For a long time nobody spoke. There was nothing left to solve. No hidden box. No secret map. No forgotten clue waiting beneath a floorboard or tucked beneath a bench. Only the quiet truth Ethan had spent years preparing them to find. Ranger rested near the edge of the clearing. His breathing was slow and steady. The old German shepherd looked peaceful in a way Noah had not seen for months. The tension that had followed him through every room of the farmhouse seemed gone. Emily noticed it too. She sat beside him and gently ran her fingers through his fur. Ranger lifted his head and looked toward her. For a moment, something passed between them. Not words. Not understanding in any ordinary sense. Just recognition. A mission completed. A promise fulfilled. The evening breeze drifted through the grass. Noah opened the final envelope again and studied Ethan's handwriting. At the bottom of the letter, beneath everything else, he found one sentence he had missed before. It had been written smaller than the rest. Almost as if Ethan had added it at the last moment. If Ranger ever stops waiting by the wheelchair, do not be sad. It means he finally knows I am home. Noah swallowed hard. His eyes moved toward the dog. Ranger had spent nearly a year sleeping beside that empty chair. Nearly a year guarding memories nobody else knew existed. Nearly a year carrying a burden he could never explain. And now, sitting beneath the open sky, he looked lighter. Emily read the sentence over Noah's shoulder. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they carried warmth instead of grief. As the first stars began appearing overhead, the family unpacked the small cooler and shared a simple meal together. They talked about Ethan. Not about his illness. Not about losing him. They spoke about camping trips, terrible jokes, burned pancakes, and long summer evenings spent fishing by the lake. For the first time in many months, laughter returned naturally. Ranger listened from the grass nearby, occasionally lifting an ear at the sound of Ethan's name. The night settled slowly across the valley. Before leaving, Noah walked to the wooden post and placed one of the family photographs inside the metal box. A new memory. Just as Ethan had asked. Then they began the walk back down the trail. Ranger rose and followed. But something had changed. For the first time since the journey began, he was not leading them. He walked beside them. The next morning they returned home. Sunlight poured through the farmhouse windows as Emily unlocked the front door. Noah stepped inside and stopped. Ranger entered quietly behind him. The wheelchair remained exactly where it had always been. Waiting near the living room window. The dog looked at it for several seconds. Noah held his breath. Emily did too. Ranger slowly approached the chair. He sniffed one of the wheels. His tail gave a gentle wag. Then, without hesitation, he turned away. He crossed the room and settled beside the fireplace where Ethan used to sit on winter evenings. He lowered his head onto his paws and closed his eyes. Peacefully. Completely. Noah felt tears forming again. Not because something had ended. Because something had finally healed. Outside, a soft wind moved through the trees. Inside, the house no longer felt haunted by absence. It felt filled with love that had simply changed its shape. And in the quiet that followed, beneath the warmth of the morning sun, a loyal old German shepherd finally allowed himself to rest.